Dear students, now I welcome you all to this module 2 in Business Ethics and CSR. So we'll be starting off with the topic, what is Consumer Protection Act? So this module basically covers two acts, that is Consumer Protection Act and Environment Protection Act. So in this session today, we'll be covering about Consumer Protection Act. So what all are going to be the topics that we'll be covering? Who's a consumer? What is the meaning of a consumer? How do we protect consumers? What is the history of Consumer Protection Act? The importance, objectives, scope, need of Consumer Protection Act, and how are Indian consumers exploited? What are the rights being given to consumers, and what is the legal protection under Consumer Protection Act? So now let's first start off with who is a consumer. So consumer, it refers to basically an individual who uses certain goods or services, which are generated within an economy. So a person who acquires those goods and services for direct consumption is called as a consumer. So a person, a wholesaler or a retailer will not be included under Consumer Protection Act because he is not, included in the list of consumers. So consumer under Consumer Protection Act is one who buys certain commodities, goods or services which that individual directly consumes. So for example, when your father buys apple for you and you consume them, your father as well as you both are treated as consumers. So the same thing even happens when you hire a taxi to go to your school or office. So over there also you are treated as a consumer under Consumer Protection Act. Now, who is a consumer and what is consumer protection? So, it is defined under this act. A consumer has been defined as a person or a firm or a Hindu undivided family, a cooperative or an association which, first of all, it's important that buys goods for consideration which have fully or partly been paid for with a purpose that does not include resale or any commercial purposes. So when you buy a good or a service that you directly use for your own self by paying either partly or by paying fully, you would be included in the list of consumers. Second is hires or avails any service for a consideration which has been partly or fully paid for with a purpose that does not include free service or services under a personal contract. So if you are availing services that are complementary services or that are services under a personal contract, over there also you'll not be included as a consumer. So consumer protection, it refers to, the necessary steps to be taken or measures required to be accepted to protect consumers from business malpractices. It is very important that, when you're paying for certain goods or services and which you directly want to consume, which you are not buying for the purpose of reselling, over there you need to be protected from these business malpractices, and over there you treat it as a consumer. Further, let's see why do we need to protect the consumers. See, there are numerous reasons for which the consumer needs to be protected. First of all, the reason is collective bargaining. So there's a sellers lobby. They're forming of cartels, and these cartels or these lobbies, they artificially keep the prices very high. So over there is a need for collective bargaining, and because of which the consumers need to be protected. Then there are multiple laws, like we see the Indian Contract Act, like we see the Sales of Good Act, we see the Essential Commodities Act. So when there are multiple laws over there also, it is required that the consumer should be protected. Then there are numerous hurdles in litigation, like how it is expensive and time consuming regularly going to the court. So there are hurdles in litigation. So there also we need to protect the rights of the consumers. And then the remedy thing, if we talk about, so it is required that the punishment should be in punitive and deterrent measurement basically. So all this is required so as to protect the consumers. Now we talk about the concept of consumer protection. What is the concept of consumer protection? Consumer protection, it means basically what we're aiming at is to safeguard the interests and the rights of consumers. So, if I had to explain you this in very simple terms, it refers to measures which are adopted for the protection of consumers from all these business malpractices, from unethical practices which are done by these business people. And once we hear the grievance out, then it is also required that there is a speedy redressal system. So we'll learn in the later on slides that a state forum, a district forum, and a national forum has been established under the Consumer Protection Act, so that a speedy redressal of these grievances can take place. Further seen, what is the Consumer Protection Act? So first of all, this act was enacted in 1986 so as to protect the interests of the consumers. Then the provisions of the act, they came in effect from 15th of April 1987, and it imposes basically a strict liability on the manufacturers in case of the products which are supplied by them, they are seen to be defective, or wherein we see that the services which are to be rendered by certain service providers, they do not meet the expectations. So over there, in order to protect the consumers from these sufferings, the Consumer Protection Act was laid down in 1986. Further moving on, we see what is the history of Consumer Protection Act. So this act, it was passed on 9th of December 1986, and from 1st of July 1987 it came into force. Rajya Sabha, we see that it passed it on 10th of December 1986, and it was assented by the President of India on 24th December 1986. Further, it was published in the Gazette of India on 26th December 1986. So this is a brief history of Consumer Protection Act, right? And what are the features of this act? So the basic features of this act is that it applies to all goods and services and unfair trade practices unless specifically exempted by the central government. So it covers all sectors also, whether it is a public, private or cooperative sectors. And it provides for establishment of consumer protection councils at all levels. So the central level, state level, district level, it provides for the establishment of consumer protection councils at all these levels, so that we can promote and protect the rights of consumers. So a three-tier judicial machinery has been established in India so as to protect the grievances and so as to redress it, so as to have a proper redressal system of these grievances, right? Further moving on, we see what are the objectives of the Consumer Protection Act. The basic objectives of forming this act were to protect the consumers from abuse, to solve the grievances, if any, uh, at a real fast pace, and so as to ensure a better quality of living by improving the quality of the products and services that are manufactured and delivered to these consumers. So what is the importance of this act? So the importance of this act, it can be understood from consumers point of view, like in the unorganized sector in developing countries like India also, we see that the consumers, they are not very organized. There are very few consumer organizations which are working to protect the interests of consumers. So Consumer Protection Act, it provides power and rights to these organizations, as these organizations can file complaints of a customer in under this consumer protection. Similarly, the consumer is, if we talk about the consumer ignorance here, it helps us in spreading awareness to the consumer so that the consumer can know about various redressal agencies where they can approach to protect their interests. Similarly, we see that there is a widespread exploitation of consumers. So the businessmen, they're using unfair trade practices so as to cheat and exploit the consumers. So Consumer Protection Act, it would safeguard such consumers from exploitation being done by these manufacturers and service providers. Similarly, if we talk from business point of view, we see that the businessman, it uses the society's resources. So they earn profit by supplying goods and services to these members of the society only. So they must use these resources so as to benefit the society. And this is why, the Consumer Protection Act was being laid down. Secondly, we see that even the businesses, they have social responsibility. They are socially, they need to have a social obligation towards the customer. It is the responsibility of these businessmen to provide good quality goods at reasonable prices to the consumers. So consumer protection, it guides these businessmen to provide such social responsibilities also. Furthermore, we see that there is government intervention. If businessmen they want to avoid intervention of government, then they should not involve themselves in such unfair trade practices. So businesses they should voluntarily involve themselves in activities which can protect the interests of consumers. Similarly, we see consumer is the purpose of business. So why is a business being done? It is being done so that more consumers they get attached to a business. So the basic purpose of a business is to create more and more customers and retain them over a period of time. So businesses will be able to create more customers only if they are able to satisfy their existing customers. Then only word of mouth publicity will be positive about them. And if we protect the right of the consumers, then we'll be able to add on to our existing customer base also. Moving on to the national forum. So this is the final forum where the complaint can be redressed. So this committee over here, the national forum, it is formed by a president, and then there are four other members. Or one of these members needs to be a woman. So these members are they are again appointed by the central government. And in 1986, the national forum had jurisdiction to entertain complaints where the value of the goods or the services did not exceed 20 lakhs, but now over the years this limit goes beyond 10 crore also. So the national forum sends the goods if required, and if the aggrieved party is still not satisfied with the judgment, then they can go ahead and file a complaint in Supreme Court within 30 days. Okay, so what we have learned in this particular session, we'll sum it up. So here are the key takeaways for this particular lecture. Like, what is the meaning of a consumer? So in today's session, we learned that a consumer is someone who buys goods or services for his own use rather than for reselling purposes, or in order to manufacture his goods further. So, like, consumer is one who directly would consume a particular product, right? Similarly, we learned about the rights of a consumer. So, there are various rights being given to a consumer under Consumer Protection Act, like the right to safety, right to information, right to choice, right to be heard, right to seek redressal, right to consumer education, right to basic needs, and right to healthy environment. In today's session, we also learned about the legal protection being given to a consumer. So we said in case you have a grievance, with related to your purchase or related to the service that you avail from an organization. So if the amount of the goods or services it is up till 1 crore, you can move up to the district forum. If it is more than 10 crore, you can move up to the you can move up to the state forum. If it exceeds an amount of 10 crore, then you can move up to the national forum. We also learned how the committees, how these forums are established, right? Only in national forum it is important that there should be a women member also. In other two forums like the state forum or the district forum, it is not required. So this is the key takeaway for today's session, right? Moving ahead, so these are the questions that I want you to answer. What are the rights granted under the Consumer Protection Act to a consumer? And where can the complaint be filed by a consumer? So these are the references that I use in order to prepare this lecture. Thank you, class.